They say you should never get too comfortable at your job, but when you've spent 16 years running a production line without a single safety violation, without a missed deadline, without even a single product recall, comfort isn't the word. It's commitment. I'm Amanda Reyes. I'm 47 years old, and for most of my adult life, I was the senior floor coordinator at Maclen Manufacturing, one of the largest consumer packaging plants in the Midwest. I started there when my daughter was in kindergarten. By the time she graduated college, I was the one keeping the machines humming, the workflow steady, the numbers green. My team called me the anchor. My supervisors called me reliable. And for years, that was enough. Until one Monday morning, I was called into a conference room with beige walls and a forced smile from HR. "We're restructuring," they said, like it was a weather report. Not performance-related, just a strategic shift. I remember how the word strategic landed like a punch in the ribs. I wasn't fired. No, that would have made too much noise. Instead, they said they were phasing me out. My position was being streamlined into a new role, one that would be filled by someone younger, cheaper, more digitally native, right? Whatever that means. "And we'd love for you to help with the transition," said Lauren from HR, her voice soft, like she thought I might cry. I didn't cry. I nodded. Because after 16 years, you learn not to react until you're alone. The new hire was a 25-year-old named Devin. Fresh MBA, zero factory experience. He wore loafers on his first day, the kind that don't survive a warehouse floor. He introduced himself as a process optimization guy and smiled like this was his sandbox now. They asked me to train him. 1 week. That's what they gave me. I spent that week showing him the layout, the pressure points, the quirks of each conveyor belt. I handed over my manuals, my spreadsheets, the annotated logs I'd maintained over a decade and a half. I even walked him through the emergency shutoff protocol, the one I wrote myself after a near miss back in 2010. He didn't take notes. The night before my last day, I stayed late, alone. I walked the floor listening to the quiet tick of the machines, the hum of the automated packaging arm. Every corner of that space held a memory. Training new hires, fixing systems during storms, working through holidays so others could be home with their families. I didn't take a selfie. I didn't post about it. I just stood there and let the moment imprint on me. Then I turned in my badge. Nobody threw a party. No goodbye card. Just an auto-generated email. "Thank you for your service. We wish you success in your next chapter." I wasn't angry. Not yet. At first, it felt like grief. Like I had lost a part of my identity I didn't even know I still clung to. My daughter, Maya, came home from grad school that weekend. I tried to pretend everything was fine. "You okay, Mom?" she asked over dinner. "Yeah," I said, pushing vegetables around my plate. "Just adjusting." She looked at me the way daughters do when they know their mothers are lying but choose not to press. Instead, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You built that place," she said. "Don't let them make you feel disposable." I smiled, but inside I felt hollow. Over the next few months, I did what I've always done. I observed. From a distance. I still had friends on the floor. People who texted me, called me on bad days, told me things they weren't supposed to. And slowly, the cracks began to show. Missed quotas, safety violations. A small injury swept under the rug, then 2 more. Customers started complaining about late deliveries. The maintenance backlog tripled. One of the machines, a pressure sealer I'd spent years tuning, failed during a double shift, damaging thousands of units. I stayed quiet. Until the day Maya sent me a screenshot. It was a Reddit thread from a whistleblower account. "Working at Maclen is a disaster. Ever since they pushed out the experienced staff, it's been nonstop chaos. I don't feel safe." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. And for the first time since I left, I didn't feel sad. I felt something else. Something sharp. This wasn't about cost cutting anymore. This was about the cost of forgetting who built the system in the first place. And I was done watching from a distance. The first time someone reached out, it was subtle. A message from Becca, one of the shift leads I'd trained back in 2015. She never called me unless it was important. "Hey, Amanda, can we talk? Something's going on." We met at a quiet diner off Route 9. She looked tired, paler than usual. Her hands shook slightly as she stirred her coffee. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said quickly, but I didn't know who else to call. "You're never a bother," I replied. "Tell me what's happening." She took a breath and launched into it. Missed safety checks, workers quitting mid-shift, Devin making decisions without consulting anyone on the floor. She described a conveyor jam that wasn't reported for 2 full hours because the night lead didn't want to wake the new boss. Thousands of units had to be discarded. "I tried to raise it to Lauren in HR," she said, voice low. But she just said, "We're in a period of transition. Be flexible." I felt a tightness crawl up my spine. "Has anyone else said anything?" She nodded. "Yeah," quietly. "But no one wants to risk being seen as a problem. You know how it is." I did. For 16 years, I watched how the company handled problems. First, they ignore you. Then they isolate you. Then they replace you. Becca looked at me, her voice barely a whisper now. "Amanda, I think someone's going to get seriously hurt." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch with the lamp on low, flipping through old notebooks from my time at Maclen. Process maps, contingency plans, even old floor rosters. My notes were always detailed. Obsessively so, some would say. But now they felt like breadcrumbs. Proof that the system had once worked. That it could again. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't an employee anymore. I had no title, no power. Just a box of records and a rising sense of responsibility. Then I remembered the whistleblower thread, the Reddit post. It hadn't been from Becca. Someone else had spoken up, which meant there were others, people who still cared. I created an anonymous email address and posted a response. If you've worked at Maclen and noticed changes that put people at risk, you're not alone. There are people who will listen and help. Within 2 days, I had 9 emails, all from current or recently departed employees, most of them afraid, all of them angry. Stories of cuts to training hours, safety drills skipped, a forklift incident in Warehouse B that was never filed. But one email stopped me cold. "I was injured 2 weeks ago. Devin told me not to report it. Said it would look bad during audits. I had to use vacation time to heal." No name, no signature, just pain. That was the moment I knew silence wasn't an option anymore. I called Maya. She was in Boston finishing her graduate program, but she picked up on the first ring. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" "I need your help," I said. "Legal help." A pause. Then, "Tell me everything." By the end of the week, we had a plan. Maya connected me to a former professor who specialized in corporate whistleblower protections. We spent hours going through every note, every email, every piece of information I'd received. Everything had to be airtight, clean, documented. "You don't just want a story," the professor said. "You want change. That means being precise." And precise was something I knew how to be. Meanwhile, more messages trickled in. One from Raphael, a longtime technician who said he'd nearly quit after his suggestion to fix the ventilation system was dismissed as unnecessary expense. Another from Janice, who said morale was so low she'd caught one of her junior staff crying in the break room after being chewed out for asking too many questions. It was unraveling, quietly but steadily. I didn't tell them I was behind the email account. I didn't need recognition. I needed truth. But the moment that sealed it came late one night. I got a message from an unknown number. Just a photo. A production line, mid-shift. Boxes stacked haphazardly. A spilled container on the floor. And in the background, a worker using duct tape to repair part of the sorting mechanism. I zoomed in and felt my stomach turn. That was the same sorting unit I'd warned them about during my last month. I'd logged the maintenance issue. Twice. It had been flagged for replacement. They hadn't replaced it. They'd patched it. With tape. That's when the anger came. Not like a spark, but like a slow-building fire. Because it was no longer about me being replaced. It was about the system being broken. And I wasn't going to watch it crumble from the sidelines anymore. Not when people could get hurt. Not when the people I trained were left cleaning up the mess of someone else's strategic shift. You'd think after 16 years of loyalty, walking away would be the hardest part. But no. The hardest part was realizing just how quickly they had buried everything I'd built. The following week, I received a call from Jerome, one of the plant's machine operators. His voice was tight with frustration. "They're blaming us now," he said. "Management says the output issues are our fault, that we're not adapting fast enough to the new protocols." "Protocols?" I asked. "Yeah, Devin rolled out a new schedule system. Reduced downtime, fewer rotation breaks. He says it's lean manufacturing, but it's chaos. We're exhausted. Mistakes are up. Everyone's on edge." I knew what that meant. Cutting rotation breaks might look efficient on paper, but in reality, it pushed people past their limit. And in production work, fatigue was dangerous. Slower reactions, less focus, higher risk of injury. "What about safety audits?" I asked. Jerome laughed bitterly. They pushed the audit to next quarter, said they needed time to prepare. It was classic damage control. Buy time, shift blame, hope no one notices. But I noticed. And I wasn't the only one. That weekend, I invited Becca, Raphael, and Janice to my house. No formal meeting, just coffee, sandwiches, and a whiteboard in my living room. It felt strange seeing them outside of the warehouse context. These were people I'd led for years. Now we sat as equals, strategizing like survivors. "I've documented everything I've received," I said, pointing to a binder I'd compiled. "We have enough here to show a pattern. Mismanagement, neglect, and retaliatory culture." Janice looked uneasy. "But what happens if we go public? They'll retaliate." "They already are," Becca said softly, just not loudly. Raphael leaned forward. "What do we want, Amanda? An apology? Or do we want accountability?" I met his gaze. "I want change. I want the people responsible to be seen. And I want the board to know what's happening under their nose." That's when the idea hit me. The board. They were always distant. High-rise executives who saw the plant through spreadsheets and quarterly reports. But if they were made aware of what was really going on, documented and credible, they couldn't claim ignorance. So I made a decision. I wrote a letter. Not an emotional rant. A case file. Detailed, professional, supported by photos, testimonials, and internal data that had made its way to me. I outlined the decline since the leadership shift, the impact of the decisions, the risk it created, not just to people, but to their bottom line. I ended it with one line. "The plant may be your asset, but it's our livelihood. You can't fix what you refuse to see." I signed my name. No hiding, no anonymous email. I mailed it to every board member listed on Maclen's public financial disclosures. Maya helped me draft a second version, one that would go to a regional labor watchdog if the board didn't respond within 2 weeks. Not a threat, just a contingency. Then we waited. 10 days passed. Nothing. On the 11th day, I received an envelope by certified mail. Maclen Corporate Affairs. Inside was a brief, formal note from the board's compliance chair. "Ms. Reyes, thank you for your recent correspondence. We take these matters seriously and are reviewing the documentation you submitted. We will initiate a formal inquiry and will be in contact shortly. It wasn't an admission, but it was acknowledgement. And that was more than I expected." The next day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Amanda Reyes?" the voice asked. "Yes." "This is Daniel Pratt. I'm the senior advisor to the board's risk committee. I'd like to meet. Off record, confidential. Just you and me." We met in a neutral location, a small hotel conference room near the airport. He was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed, carrying a tablet and a legal pad. He didn't waste time. The board had no idea the transition was going this badly, he said. They were sold a narrative of innovation and cost efficiency. Your letter painted a very different picture. Because it is a very different picture, I replied. He nodded. You understand, if we investigate formally, it won't stay quiet. I'm not asking for quiet, I said calmly. I'm asking for truth. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Devon's position was championed by the current COO. If this unfolds the way I think it might, you're going to make powerful people very nervous. I'm not here to make friends, I said. I'm here to make sure no one else bleeds for someone else's spreadsheet. He didn't argue. He just closed his notepad and said, You'll be hearing from us soon. As I drove home, something shifted in me. For months, I'd been collecting other people's testimonies, other people's truths. But now the system was finally looking back, and I wasn't afraid of what it might see. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. 3 days after my meeting with Daniel Pratt, I got a call from Janice. Her voice was tight. Someone's asking questions about who leaked the information. I closed my eyes. Are you okay? I haven't said a word, Amanda, she replied. But it's getting weird. Devon suddenly pulled me off scheduling duties, said it's just temporary. She paused, then added, and Becca got reassigned to night shift, without warning. It had begun. The pushback. The subtle retaliation companies use when they want to punish someone, but don't want to get caught doing it. The next day, Raphael called me in a fury. They wrote me up for a mistake I didn't make. A mislabel on inventory. That section wasn't even mine. My stomach turned. This was what fear looked like from the top down. And I knew how it worked. Not with pink slips or dramatic terminations, just enough pressure to make people doubt themselves. Isolate them. Shame them into silence. But this time I was ready. That evening, I opened the folder Maya and I had labeled Contingency Phase 2. Inside was a strategy we'd hoped we wouldn't need. Escalation protocols. Media contacts. A pre-drafted letter to the Department of Labor. And testimonies, sworn and notarized, from Becca, Raphael, Janice, and 2 others who hadn't come forward publicly yet, but were willing to step up if it came to that. I reached out to Daniel. They're retaliating, I said. Silently. Strategically. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I believe you, he said. But we need something actionable. A name. A pattern. Hard documentation. I'll get it, I told him. But when I do, I want this addressed publicly. You have my word. That night, I stayed up past midnight, combing through emails forwarded to me. One from a supervisor who questioned Devon's overtime cuts and was then removed from the shift schedule for 2 weeks. Another from a young temp who had resigned after being scolded for slowing down the line during a heat wave. No fans, no AC, just sweat and pressure and fear. And then I got the file that broke me. It came from an anonymous address. No message, just a scan of an incident report. A 19-year-old worker had been hospitalized after collapsing on the production floor. Heat exhaustion. No ambulance was called. He was driven to urgent care by a coworker. The report was marked internal only and buried in a closed log. My hands shook as I read the timestamp. 3 weeks ago. They had buried it. I forwarded the file to Daniel and then to Maya. Her reply came instantly. We have enough. We move now. That morning, we submitted the formal complaint to the Department of Labor, along with over 30 supporting documents and witness statements. And then I did something I hadn't planned. I called a journalist. Her name was Alina Foster, an investigative reporter I'd followed for years. She specialized in corporate accountability, quiet revolutions. When I told her the story, she didn't hesitate. On the record? She asked. Yes, I said, voice steady. Use my name. Use everything. I gave her access to the files, the testimonies, the photos. I even sent her the letter I wrote to the board. She asked sharp questions, took detailed notes, and then said the words I hadn't realized I needed to hear. "You're not overreacting. You're doing what most people are too scared to do." The story was scheduled to run the following week, but even before it hit, something started to shift. Daniel called me again. This time his tone was different. "Internal legal is now involved," he said. "The COO is under review. There's talk of pausing Devon's role pending the inquiry." I didn't celebrate, because I knew retaliation has a long tail. The next day, my name was leaked. Someone inside Maclen, maybe HR, maybe Devon, told the staff who had filed the complaint, told them who had gone public. I found out from Janice, whose voice trembled with worry. "They're calling you a traitor, saying you just want revenge." I didn't blame them. It's what management wanted them to believe. Because if they could turn me into the villain, they wouldn't have to face what they'd done. That night, Maya called. "Are you okay?" I hesitated. "I don't know." I stood at the window, looking out over the quiet street. Somewhere in the city, Devon was probably spinning a new story. One where I was bitter, unqualified, difficult. But stories only work when people don't fight back. I thought of Becca on night shift, of Raphael and his fake write-up, of the young man who passed out while trying to earn a paycheck. And then I answered her. "I'm scared," I said honestly, "but I'm also done being quiet." The article went live on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee, trying to pretend the day would be normal. But when my phone buzzed and I saw Alina Foster's name, I knew it was time. The headline read, "Inside Maclen Manufacturing, a culture of retaliation, neglect, and silence." My name was in the subheading. So was the phrase, 16 years without a single safety violation. I read it slowly, every word. Alina hadn't sensationalized it. She didn't have to. The truth was damning enough. She had quotes from former employees, anonymized where needed. She had the timeline, the testimonies, the scanned incident report about the 19-year-old worker. She even included parts of my letter to the board. But it was the final line that hit the hardest. Amanda Reyes didn't speak out to burn bridges. She spoke out to protect the people still walking across them. The article spread faster than I could process. LinkedIn, Twitter, industry forums, even a Reddit AMA tagged me as the Maclen whistleblower. By noon, I had over 100 unread emails. Some were supportive. Old coworkers thanking me. A few from total strangers saying they'd gone through the same thing in different industries. Quiet gratitude from people who had no voice where they worked. But not all the messages were kind. One email read, "You think you're helping? All you did was put good people's jobs at risk. You should be ashamed." Another simply said, "You'll never work in this industry again." I stared at that one longer than I'd like to admit, because a part of me feared it was true. That night, I kept the lights low. Maya offered to stay on the phone, but I told her I was okay. I wasn't. I was unraveling slowly, wondering if I'd miscalculated, if speaking up had done more harm than good. But then the first domino fell. The board of Maclen Manufacturing released a statement. Effective immediately, Chief Operating Officer Benjamin Calloway has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal investigation. Devon's name wasn't mentioned, but insiders knew what it meant. Calloway was Devon's mentor. His rise had been fast, reckless, and now clearly unsustainable. I thought about the smug way Devon had shaken my hand on his first day. The way he smiled like he already owned the place. The way he wore loafers on a concrete floor. No apologies. No acknowledgement. But silence spoke loudly. More messages came. "Amanda, we owe you. That article hit harder than we thought. We're with you if you take this further." Janice. My cousin works at the warehouse. Said the entire shift paused when the news broke. They cheered. Anonymous. "I've been working in silence for years. You reminded me that we deserve better. Former plant manager from another state. For every threat, there were 10 voices rising to meet it. But Maclen didn't stay silent for long. 2 days after the article, they launched a PR campaign, a blog post titled, "Building a Safer Tomorrow." Buzzwords filled every sentence. New leadership, renewed focus, employee-first culture, no accountability, no apology. Then Devin reappeared, this time on a podcast hosted by a corporate innovation channel. His voice was steady, rehearsed. I think what we're seeing is the resistance that always comes with progress. Change is uncomfortable, but manufacturing needs modernization. Some people just don't like letting go. Some people? He never said my name, but I felt every syllable like a blade. I paused the podcast and sat with the silence. The arrogance, the total lack of ownership. It was the same story, told in different clothes. The same system that replaces experience with buzzwords, then blames the fallout on the ones who built the foundation. That night, I walked to the old plant entrance, just to see it. The lights were still on, forklifts humming, workers moving like ghosts under fluorescent buzz. 6 months ago, I ran that line. 6 months ago, I kept that place alive. And now they had the nerve to erase it all with a podcast and a PR spin. Number I hadn't come this far to let them write the final chapter. The next morning, I met Daniel again, this time at a downtown office. He looked tired but focused. "We've begun interviewing staff," he said. "The complaints line has been overwhelmed, and frankly, it's worse than we thought." I handed him a folder. Inside were new statements. People who hadn't felt safe until now. A former floor manager, a machine technician, even a junior HR rep who confirmed Callaway's pressure to streamline by targeting veteran staff. "You asked for actionable documentation," I said. "Now you've got it." Daniel nodded. "You've lit a fire, Amanda. And this time, it's not burning in the shadows." As I left the building, I saw the city skyline rising through the glass. I wasn't just fighting for my old job anymore. I was fighting for every worker who had been told they were too expensive, too slow, too outdated. And I wasn't done yet. The notice came on a quiet Thursday morning. An official email marked confidential for immediate distribution. The subject line, "Leadership Transition at Maclen Manufacturing." Inside was a simple announcement. After a comprehensive investigation into internal operations, Maclen Manufacturing has accepted the resignation of COO Benjamin Callaway. Effective immediately, an interim leadership team will oversee operations while we evaluate long-term cultural reforms. No fanfare, no excuses, just an ending. I read the message 3 times, then set my phone down on the kitchen counter. The air felt still, like the moment after a storm when the wind finally dies down. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't crying. I was just still. Maya called 2 minutes later. "You saw it?" "I did. And?" "I don't know," I said quietly. "I thought it would feel like a win." "Doesn't it?" I paused. "It feels like a start." Because the truth is, justice never comes with a parade. It comes in waves. Quiet, slow, sometimes messy. And even when it arrives, it doesn't erase the damage. It just acknowledges that it happened. Later that day, I received a call from Daniel Pratt. "Thought you should hear it from me," he said. "The board is initiating a full review of plant policies, mandatory retraining, third-party oversight, and they're dissolving the performance review system Callaway implemented." I nodded, listening. "And Devin?" I asked. "Terminated last week." Quietly. But the board agreed to issue a public acknowledgement of the production failures under his leadership. It'll be part of next quarter's investor report. He paused, then added, "I hope that helps." "It does," I said. "But I didn't do this for the footnotes." Daniel hesitated, then said something that stayed with me. "You're one of the only people I've met who didn't speak up for recognition. You spoke up because you couldn't sleep knowing you hadn't." That night, I finally allowed myself to breathe. It had been months of tension, of pushback and whispers, of fear and doubt. But now, there was space. And in that space, something unexpected took root. Not revenge, not pride, but clarity. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Raphael. "We just had our first all-hands meeting with the new interim director," he said. "And Amanda, you won't believe this. They asked us what we needed, what had been broken. They actually listened." Becca texted later. "They're reinstating rotation breaks, and we're getting hazard pay retroactively. Can you believe it?" I could. Because when people finally see you, not just as a name on a badge, but as the spine of the system, things begin to shift. In small ways, but real ones. That weekend, Maya flew home. We sat on the back porch with coffee and warm blankets, watching the morning fog lift off the trees. She looked over at me. "So, what's next?" I smiled. "Honestly, I don't know. But I'm not going back." "You could," she said. "They'd take you back in a heartbeat." "I could," I agreed. But I spent 16 years proving my worth to people who only saw me as a cost. I'm done chasing validation. She nodded, thoughtful. "What if you started something new? A training consultancy? You've got more knowledge in your notebooks than half the leadership teams in the state." I laughed. "You're serious. Dead serious. You built a system from the ground up. You trained generations. Companies need that. But this time you set the terms." I let the thought settle. It didn't feel scary. It felt possible. And then 2 weeks later, I got the message that sealed it. It was from a regional plant manager at a competitor company. "Amanda, we read the article. We followed what happened. I just wanted to say thank you. You gave people like me permission to question what we'd accepted for too long. If you ever decide to consult, we'd love to talk." Maya was right. I didn't need Maclen's approval. I had something stronger now. A reputation rooted in truth, and a voice that no longer whispered. By spring, I launched my own business, Reyes Operations Consulting. Not flashy, not loud, but real. We trained leadership teams on frontline communication, ethical staffing, and safety-forward production design. Within 3 months, we had 4 contracts. One of them, Maclen's former supplier. But the moment that mattered most didn't come from an inbox or a headline. It came one afternoon at the grocery store. A young woman in a warehouse hoodie approached me nervously. "Are you Amanda Reyes?" "I am. I work second shift at Maclen. I just wanted to say thank you. Things feel different now, safer. We can breathe again." I smiled. "That means everything." She started to walk away, then turned back. "You didn't just shake the system. You showed us we're allowed to stand up." That night, I sat alone in my office. I looked at the photo on my desk. Me and Maya from years ago. Both of us in oil-stained clothes after a volunteer build. She was right. All along. Sometimes the house needs shaking. Sometimes systems break. But the people? The people rebuild. And if they're lucky, they learn to lead on their own terms. Not quietly, not gratefully, but powerfully. Because survival isn't the goal. Standing tall after the storm is.